On the morning of my bridal shower, my neighbor decided to spray paint money Grubber across my fence because he was angry about losing street parking for one day. We called the cops, who forced him to repaint it by hand under police supervision while all my friends and family sipped champagne and watched from the porch. He never showed his face in public again. I live in Roswell, Georgia. It's a quiet place, not too busy, just outside of Atlanta. Our street is lined with single-story homes, most built in the 80s. My fiancé Brian and I bought ours just over a year ago. We were one of the youngest couples on the block. Most of our neighbors are retired or semi-retired. Some are sweet. Some, not so much. Greg lived next door. He was about 65, always wore khakis and polo shirts like he was on his way to a golf course he never actually visited. He didn't have a wife, no kids at home, and from what we could tell, no job. He stayed home and stared at people from his porch like it was his full-time job. He never waved. Never smiled. If someone parked even a little too close to his curb, he'd leave a note on their windshield. I tried to be nice when we first moved in. I baked cookies once and brought them over. He didn't open the door, just shouted through it, "Don't need 'em." That was the end of that. Still, I never thought he hated me. I just figured he was a grump. Then came the bridal shower. We'd been planning it for months. My sister Ashley and my best friend Claire were throwing it in our backyard. The whole theme was spring brunch, white tent, pastel decorations, champagne, quiche, and flowers everywhere. We expected around 30 guests, mostly women. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. We'd already sent little cards to the neighbors, letting them know the event was happening on Saturday morning. I even taped a polite sign near the curb the night before that said, "Private event Saturday morning, please be courteous with street parking." We weren't throwing a wild party. We weren't blocking driveways. It was a few cars parked along the curb and a bunch of women drinking mimosas. Greg got the card. I know because I handed it to him directly and said, "Just a heads up for this Saturday." He nodded but didn't say anything. So when I woke up that Saturday around 7:45 a.m., I wasn't expecting anything to be wrong. I was still in my robe, drinking coffee, looking out the window when I saw him. Greg. Hoodie on. Red spray can in hand. He was writing something on our side fence. I blinked a few times, not sure what I was seeing. Then I saw the letters. Money Grubber. 3 feet tall, written in dripping, red paint across my fence. It looked like a damn horror movie. I dropped my coffee. Literally. It shattered on the tile. I ran outside barefoot. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted. Greg didn't even look surprised. He tossed the can onto my lawn and said, "You think this street belongs to you now? You got cars lined up already like you run the place." I couldn't speak. I was shaking. Brian came out seconds later and saw the fence. He didn't scream. He didn't curse. He just walked right back inside, got his phone, and called the police. Greg muttered, "Good, call 'em. Let's see what they do." Turns out, they did plenty. The officer who showed up was young but serious. He asked me what happened. I told him. Then Brian pulled up the security camera footage. Clear as day, Greg walking over with a spray can, shaking it, and defacing our fence in broad daylight. The officer watched the footage twice. Then he turned to Greg. "I've got vandalism and property damage. You want to be arrested for this?" the cop asked him. Greg mumbled something about it being his right or parking rules, but the cop cut him off. "Here's what's going to happen," the officer said. "You're going to go buy a gallon of white exterior paint, a brush, and you're going to repaint that fence right now. I'm going to supervise. Or I can arrest you and charge you. Your choice." Greg stared at the cop. Then he looked at me. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. He left to get the paint. By then, guests had started arriving. Claire and Ashley were already setting up the food. They saw the fence. Saw the cop. Saw Greg come back with a paint can and a cheap brush. And then, the most satisfying thing I've ever witnessed happened. Greg, kneeling in the Georgia sun, was forced to repaint the fence he vandalized. And my entire bridal shower watched it happen. Every one of my aunts. Every friend in their sundresses. Claire brought out extra champagne and passed it around. Nobody said a word to him. They just watched. Toasted. Laughed quietly. One of my cousins took a video. Ashley leaned over and said, "Now that's a bridal shower memory." I smiled. For the first time that morning, I actually smiled. The shower went on like nothing happened after that. The food was great, people were laughing, and Greg kept his head down the whole time. He was out there repainting the fence for 2 straight hours while the rest of us sipped champagne and took photos in front of the flower arch. By the time he was done, the sun was high, and his shirt was soaked with sweat. He didn't say a word to anyone. Not to me, not to the officer, not to Brian. He packed up his paint can, walked back into his house, and shut the door like he was slamming a coffin lid. We figured that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, I noticed one of the little signs we'd placed by the curb, the ones that said "reserved for bridal guests," was missing. Then Brian told me his car had been keyed. Not deep, but enough to notice if you looked. Just one long, thin scratch across the driver's side. We both knew who it was. But there were no cameras pointed at the street, and no one saw anything. So we didn't bother with the cops this time. I told Brian to let it go. "He's embarrassed," I said. That was his revenge. Let it end here. But Greg wasn't done. About a week later, one of my coworkers sent me a link. A Facebook post. It was from a local community group called Roswell Watchdogs, and someone had posted a rant with no names but a lot of details. Some people think they can take over the block just because they have money and throw parties. Blocking streets, disturbing the peace, calling the cops when someone defends property rights. It had dozens of comments. Some agreed, others pushed back. But I knew Greg wrote it. The phrasing, the bitterness, it had him all over it. I replied with a simple comment. "Sounds like a sore neighbor who doesn't understand how public streets work." Face blowing a kiss. That comment got 100 likes. People started asking what really happened. I didn't respond after that, but someone else, my cousin, actually, posted the video. The one of Greg repainting the fence. That post exploded. In 2 days, everyone in the neighborhood group had seen it. Some thought it was hilarious. Others said it was humiliating. A few old-timers defended Greg, saying we'd ganged up on an old man. But most people sided with me. Especially the younger families who had dealt with Greg's rants before. One woman wrote, "He tried to call the bride a money grubber and ended up painting fences in front of 30 women sipping champagne. You can't make this up." After that, Greg went silent. He stopped sitting on his porch. His curtains stayed drawn. Even his lawn got overgrown. I hadn't seen him outside in weeks, and I didn't miss him. But it wasn't over. Not yet. One night, about 2 weeks after the video went up, Brian and I were watching a movie when we heard a knock at the door. Not the front door. The side door. The one that faces Greg's house. Brian opened it. And there he was. Greg stood there in a jacket, holding a folded piece of paper. He looked smaller than I remembered. Like someone had deflated him. He didn't look at me. Just handed the paper to Brian and walked away. I took it from him and read it. It wasn't an apology. It was a letter. A warning. "Enjoy your little moment," it said. "But this street doesn't forget. You humiliated me in front of everyone, and people like you don't stay on top forever. Just remember that." I laughed. But Brian didn't. He said, "This guy's not done. We need to watch ourselves." So I installed 2 more cameras. One on the backyard. One facing Greg's house. And we waited. 2 weeks passed. No more scratches on our car. No missing signs. Greg's place stayed quiet, like he'd disappeared into it. But every time I stepped outside, I felt his house watching me. I wouldn't say I was scared, but I was always on edge. Then one morning I got a call from Mrs. Diaz. She lives 2 doors down and has lived on the block for over 30 years. She's the type who always knows what's going on, like a human neighborhood watch with a perm. She said, "Honey, you didn't hear this from me, but I thought you should know. Greg's been going around telling folks he's gathering evidence against you and Brian. Said you're running some illegal event planning business out of your home. That you lied to the city about permits for the party." I was stunned. "That was my bridal shower," I said. "I didn't charge anyone for it." "I know that," she replied. "But he's twisting it. Said you broke zoning laws. He's been asking around for someone who works in code enforcement." That's when something snapped in me. This man vandalized my property, embarrassed himself, and then couldn't live with the fact that people saw him for who he was. So now he was trying to destroy our name in the neighborhood? Brian and I talked that night. I asked him one question: "You remember what that guy down the street told us last year? About Greg's backyard?" Brian paused. "The old shed?" "Yeah. He said Greg runs his ham radio gear from back there. Keeps it powered with some rigged-up wiring. It's not up to code. He said it once caught fire and the fire department had to come out." Brian nodded slowly. "Yeah. He mentioned something about a generator and extension cords running out of a basement window." "I want to know what's back there," I said. "If he's going to play dirty, we need to be ready." We didn't go over the fence or break any laws. But I knew someone who could help. Claire's boyfriend, Lucas, works for the city. Not high up, but in the records department. I texted him and asked if there had ever been complaints about Greg's property. He called me back within an hour. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "That guy has 4 unresolved violations from 2017 to 2021. All electrical. One involved illegal wiring running through a storage shed, another was about tampering with a transformer box behind his house." Why wasn't anything done? He claimed he fixed it every time, but never let inspectors in to confirm. Then COVID hit and things fell through the cracks. I was quiet for a second. Then I said, "Can I report a concern anonymously?" Lucas laughed. "You want me to send code enforcement over?" "Yeah. I want it official. And I want them to check everything." He submitted the report. Totally anonymous. 3 days later, 2 city workers in reflective vests showed up at Greg's door. I watched from inside, sipping coffee. He opened the door. They showed him a clipboard. He tried to argue, then walked them around the side. One of the workers was taking photos of the backyard. The shed. The cables. I could see it from our upstairs window. They stayed for nearly an hour. Then they left. Greg didn't come out the rest of the day. That evening, I got a text from Lucas. "Looks like your neighbor's about to get slapped with some serious fines." I can't say more, but he's not going to be happy. I smiled. Not out of spite. Out of relief. He wanted to play games. He wanted to dig into our lives, call us names, lie to people, report us for zoning violations we didn't commit? Fine. But now he had city code enforcement crawling over his property, and from the looks of it, they'd found way more than I ever expected. 3 days after the city inspectors came, I was outside watering the plants when Greg finally showed his face again. He didn't say anything at first. Just stood on his side of the fence, arms crossed, staring at me. I ignored him. Then he spoke. Loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough so no one else would. you think you've won? I set the watering can down and looked at him. Won what, Greg? This little war. You're just another spoiled girl playing house. People like you always crash. I didn't flinch. You keyed our car, lied to the neighborhood, called the city on us, and wrote on my damn fence. And now that your shed's being investigated for code violations, I'm the problem? He stepped closer to the fence. You had no right. No right? I said, laughing once. You publicly humiliated me before one of the biggest days of my life. You tried to destroy a moment I'd waited years for. You got caught. You repainted that fence in front of everyone, and now you're mad that people saw the real you. His jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked back inside. That was the last time he ever spoke to me. 2 weeks later, we got a letter in our mailbox from the city addressed to Greg, but misdelivered. Brian took it to Lucas, who confirmed Greg had been fined over $7,000 for multiple violations. The city gave him 60 days to fix the wiring, tear down the shed, or face legal action. 60 days came and went. No work crews showed up. No electricians. Nothing. Then, one afternoon, I saw a for sale sign hammered into Greg's front yard. Just like that, he was done. The house stayed empty for a while after he moved. No goodbye. No note. Just vanished. And I wish I could say I never thought about him again, but I did. Not out of fear. Out of something more complicated. In a way, he got what he deserved. He tried to hurt me out of pure bitterness and ended up embarrassing himself and getting hit where it hurt, his pride and his wallet. But part of me knew I'd played dirty too. I didn't just want him to stop. I wanted him to pay. Maybe I crossed a line when I went after the code stuff. Maybe I didn't. But when I look at that fence, still a slightly brighter white than the rest, I know one thing: some people mistake kindness for weakness. They think quiet people don't bite back. They don't expect you to fight. Greg did that. And now he's gone. And I'm still here. With my husband. With my house. With my fence. And with a story that everyone in Roswell still whispers about at barbecues and neighborhood meetings. Let 'em whisper. I earned that fence.